On this episode, we're going to finish up the back half, install brakes, fuel, and air systems, get that all wrapped up, and get ready to finish the back half of the truck. So now we're getting back into the back half. We got it all suspension in and everything cycled, got it all working. Now we're going to get into the fine details of the back half. We're designed a fuel cell for back here to go in between the rails because the stock one gets deleted to the 4-link and all the suspension in. And then we're going to put, I think, the compressors on either side of the tank. We have some mounts that we've made. The air tank right here in the middle between the watts and the fuel cell. And then for the air system, we're going to do LevelRide air suspension controllers. We're going to do pressure and height sensors. So we got to mount the sensors on the rear arms and in the front, and then the control valve and the ECU, all the brain and everything there. So we'll kind of go through all the details there. I think we're going to put the solenoid block up there kind of in the front. Then we can run either way, and it'll be fairly close to make the ECU go inside the cab. And then we're going to go and finish up the brakes, and we're going to do the disc brake conversion on this pre-Tacoma rear end, which it'll fit Tacoma or pre-Tacoma, but that'll be a separate video that will go into detail on the actual brake conversion for the disc brakes. But then we also need to redo all the brake lines. It's not required to redo the brake lines, but on this one we decided to redo them because there was some bent lines and stuff because it's just a junkyard rear end. So we were there, we're like, we'll just redo it and show it all. So we'll finish up the brake lines, fuel and air and all that, and then we'll have a completed back half. We can tear it down for paint and keep going on the truck. Back to figuring out more on this back half, and I thought I would just go over what we figured out so far. So got some compressor mounts on each side on the frame, and then the air tank mount, so I can go over that in more detail. But what we're going to do now is bolt in the fuel cell and work on the factory fuel line. Is up here right behind the cab is where they naturally had a break, so we can just run a PFTE line up, soft line up for the pressure line, and then also a hose back for the return, and both of them right there hooked in the factory. So pretty straightforward. So we'll bolt that in, get that set, and then we can start working on the air system, getting the air tank in, the compressors and all that, and working on all the airline stuff. Here's the fuel cell that we got. This will be an option for the back half that we're working on. This is what it's 14 gauge stainless, all TIG welded, fuel pump, sender, and then I found a little electronic box that goes with the sender so you can program it to do whatever you need for resistance for the ohm rating for the gauge. So like I forget what the factory Tacoma is, but I can look it up. And then you can basically tell the sender what ohm rating is full and empty, and it'll scale it from there, so then the factory gauge will work, or you can use any other scale of gauges that are used in the truck, so it can be pretty universal. And then the tank and the hanger, you can have different fuel pumps, obviously, that bolt on the bottom or in the tank. And then this one's set up for rear center mount, or a fill for the mount. So it goes in, bolts in underneath, and then we can start hooking everything up. And it's, I don't remember the exact, I'll look up the gallons, but it's over 15 gallons, I think. Yeah, I think it's closer to 18, but we'll have it. We're gonna do a little, this is the first prototype that we did of it. We're gonna make a couple changes, probably square it off, give a little bit more room. It's pretty tight for the tank right now, the air tank. So it might lose like a gallon or something of capacity, but this is part of prototyping. So we'll get this bolted up and then keep going. Up doing for this one was drilling holes in the bottom of the frame rail and then put nut certs in the bottom. So there's nut certs slid up inside the rail. We just drill the hole. So that way we have plenty of threads. See what, there's the fuel pump, return vent pressure. Here's the sender. This is kind of a cool sender. So a lot of them are like cantilevered, like a big float thing, and this is just a linear slide. So, and inside this, there's a bunch of cross, like baffles. So there's a couple baffles in here and everything to keep all the slosh and stuff down. So I can insert kind of the 3D drawing of what the tank looks inside and stuff, just kind of give you an idea. But then this goes in and doesn't get in the way of the baffle. So it's baffled in this corner and that corner so that we don't have a bunch of fuel slosh problems, or hopefully this will keep the reading a little bit more accurate. So, and this one is unique on the pattern, so it rotates it the right way. This one doesn't really matter because it's not the arm, but most senders it does. But you have to pay attention to the bolt pattern because it matters which way it fits in there. That way. I'll just show you this. This is that, they call it the meter match, and by tanks. And this is the fuel gauge interface that will allow you to change the ohm reading. So that'll go inside the truck. Get it? So then we can run from factory line. So on the hard line, what we ended up doing was cutting off just the flare on the end of the hard line, putting a half 20 nut and re-single flare, or no, we double flared it, inverted flare, half 20. And then we could just do a fitting that went to PFTE hose. And then we can just run the PFTE up. And then this is pipe thread to -6 AN line. And then we'll have that, and then the returns barb fitting on both ends, factory and here. So we can run those and call it good for fuel. Then move on to air next. Now we got this fuel line set in here. I was just gonna show you what we like to use for clamps. They're like these little stainless clamps that clamp against the rail. So they go over like that, and then just drill and tap 1032 stainless screw right there, and that holds them tight against. I prefer those. There's some other ones that like hold them off, but with this soft line, I like to hold them against the rail, prevent them from movement. So I think we can clamp one here, one more right on the tank, or right beside the tank here, and that'll keep it from flopping around and give us some room to work the airline stuff around as well. So we'll go install these clamps and be wrapped up mostly with the fuel system. moving on to the air system. We got fuel system wrapped up and mocked in, ready to go. So now we got a 5-gallon seamless aluminum tank to put here, dual compressor mounts, and then the LevelRide management system. So it's got a valve block that will bolt up here in the front and then be able to run all the lines and in and out compressor and all that stuff. So we'll start working on that. There's the air tank. So on this just has a couple straps with feet that are on the air tank. So then we just made some little, basically foot mounts, little brackets that just go on this Watts cross member, and then that'll just bolt straight down to the feet. Put on there, and then we have a tank pressure sensor and out to the valve body, and then compressors will each go on each end of the tank there. So bolt that in. A little bit of this pre-planned out. We've been thinking, looking, and then the bottom, there's a port in the bottom for tank drain, and included with the LevelRide is this automatic tank drain. So if you can figure out a way to mount this, it'll come out of the tank, and then this will cycle every time. I think it's when you turn it on, every time you turn the key on. And you can program this inside the Level brain. But I think default how it's set up is you turn the key on and it'll cycle and take the water out of the tank. And then I made up this little bracket and it'll bolt on to the 3 bolts there. And then we can just tack that, put it right on the other side of the frame. And this can in-bolt, unbolt as we need it, but then this will just be a little adapter bracket with a little built-in gusset. So my plan is for like the air system, and then I guess over here we have a plate for the solenoid itself. So my plan is to just have like a little add-on package if you want for the system. We'd have those 2 feet brackets, this bracket, the manifold bracket, anything that we've developed on this back half to help with the air system mounting. Just these little brackets, and then you can move things around if you need to, but at least you don't have to sit here and whittle out these brackets out of something. We just cut them on the CNC and bend them, and pretty easy. So be able to provide that and make it a little easier for you. So we can bolt this in, bolt the manifold on, and then compressors. And I'll go over the compressor mount when we get there. So we mounted up the LevelRide valve block, and a couple things I want to just note on this is, so there's smaller NPT on one side and larger, I think it's 1/8 inch and 1/4, if I'm not mistaken. The smaller are for the sensors. So this is a pressure and sensor height system. So it's measuring, we got to put little sensors on here. That measures the suspension travel as well as the air pressure, and that's how it's using to adjust and do all its leveling. But you want to make sure these sensors are pointed straight up for them to work properly. So we've elected to mount the valve block on its side. You can mount it flat, but you would just have to use 90-degree fittings that are provided with the kit to mount these sensors straight up. So this makes it kind of easy because we can come in from the tank right here in, exhaust out on this side, and then out the bottom is all our 4 corners. So it can come from the bag mounts from each corner into the bottom there. And I elected to hardline everything to do it for this truck. You can do push to connects and DOT line if you like as the kit comes. I prefer hardline. It's more long-term, less chances of leaking and all that, but a lot more work and cost in fittings and stuff. But I tend to have better luck with it and just prefer to do it. Most of the builds we do here either do And most of them all want to do hardline stuff, so that's just what we're used to using. So, and then this is the plug, the pre-wired plug that goes to the ECU for the brain. And there just happens to be a soft plug right here in the cab. So we'll be able to just hop right in here, go right into the brain and mount it right in the extended cab. There's a little cubby there that used to be like the stock jack location. So we'll just stick it right there. It'll be out of the way. So that'll be good there. So that, the long part now will be doing all the lines, and then we can mount the compressor. So I thought I'd just go over a little bit of the behind the scenes stuff of just kind of the process when we're designing new products and developing new parts and all that. So it all starts here on the computer when I come up with an idea. So what we're showing here is the compressor mount for the air system. And I wanted to make something on the frame rail that was somewhat universal, easy to get to. I'm thinking this will be on the back half, like beside the fuel tank on the outside of the rails, and so like being able to get to it and service it. So I decided to make it, I don't know, like easy to service and get off. So there's this bracket, so the frame rail, and then this orange bracket here is rubber isolated, and it kind of sits on the bottom portion of the bracket and then bolts on the sides. But the cool thing is I made this so it's got slots. So we'll be able to put the bolts in there and kind of like pick it up, put it on the bolts, slide it on, and then bolt it down and tighten it a little bit. So it'll stay on there, but when you go to service it, you just gotta loosen the bolts and take it off, and then be able to like bring the compressor down out away so you're not trying to work up tight. So that was kind of my idea that I've been toying around with here. And this is all a sheet metal part. So here I'm using fusion. If I look at this compressor mount, and I can make like a flat pattern. So then it develops it, unfolds it basically, and tells me where all the bend lines are, and then I can export this DXF. We can take it out to laser and cut it, and then go to the press brake and bend it all up. So that's just kind of, I thought I'd show a little bit behind the scenes cool stuff on how we do it. And then, so I'll prep all these files for the laser, and then we'll go over there, cut them on the laser, then bring them over and bend them up and put them on the back half and show you all that process. Now I'm in the laser room, and what I've done is I've taken some of got a couple different thicknesses of parts. So I've taken all the parts that are the same thickness here and imported them in the software and kind of nested them all in. There's not a whole lot of parts, so I just nested them manually, just kind of threw them in here to get somewhat of a efficient cutout. We're not, flipping parts around 180 and nesting them together and doing all that. So I got this all laid out. I'll get all the settings figured out on the laser, make sure it's cutting the material it wants, all the settings. I'll do a little bit of a test cut, and then we'll cut these parts, and then we'll go through and I'll show you that part of the cutting, and then just kind of shows you the whole process of how we're doing it without getting into the boring detail. I got to set up the settings on everything, and then we're ready to cut. A lot of this stuff doesn't really make sense because it's my own settings and what we figured out for the laser, but give me a sec here, we'll get this all figured out. We'll do that, we'll test and make sure that it's all gonna stay in the spot. Move over here and can watch it cut out. Got some test cuts done. We're gonna go ahead and cut the rest of them. There we go. Hot off the laser. That's what it looks like without any cleanup. So we can get these parts taken off here and get them over and get them ready to bend up and put on the back half. All right, so here's the compressor mount design that I came up with here. And it's a main bracket that the compressor mounts to either direction. It's universal. You can have the compressor mounted 180 degrees of each other. So when I had this in mind, I wanted this to be rubber isolated and not just be bolted to the frame, because it transfers the vibration and the noise. So I also wanted something that was just kind of easy. Almost everybody's going to mount these on the frame or under, so they're not exactly going to be easy to get to all the time. So came up with this almost like a picture hanger where it's going to have a couple bolts. So it has 3 bolts with rubber isolators on it, and then you'll be able to stick this on the bolt over the bolt hood, slide it down, and it'll sit. And so technically it'll just sit there while you work on it, and then you can just snug up these 3 bolts for permanent mounting, and then you just unsnug them basically, and then slide it up and pull it off. And then that would be able to drop down. The line would still be able to be hooked up to your tank if you need to do some service or change the air filter or do whatever you need to do on it, and it's not like this big cumbersome thing. So we'll have one of these on each side for the dual compressor mounts. So if we look here, it's a little rubber bushing, like a shock bushing, and they have a little step in them, so that goes in and just kind of locks in. We've got a big flanged washer and a nut on this side. So you just do them loose, leave a little gap in there, and then same thing on this side. And then bottom, put the rubber on there, sit there. So what this will do is, see, this will go on like that, and then slide down, just sits on there. Stick the bolt in from the bottom. Just kind of snug these up, and then we'll get a wrench on there. But now that's all rubber isolated, good to go. And then it's got a dual pattern here for these Viers, and that leaves enough room here for the intake. So you can do that. That'll fit nicely right into our tank. And then on the other side, same thing, dual mounts, hang there. Pretty slick. They're universal, and so I've actually made it where, here, I'll grab the camera and show you. So I've actually made it here where, it's kind of hard to see, but there's this little gusset here that it's tabbed and slotted into this main frame plate, and this is set up for 2x4, and then there'll be a different gusset as well for this is 2x3, and there's also a gusset for 2x4. So, and what that does is that locates it so the bottom of the bracket is level with the bottom of the rail. So this will sit right at the bottom, and so these gussets will allow you just to set it on there and either put it on 2x3 or 2x4 frame rails, and then just mount on there. So I'm trying to make it kind of universal. So now that we got all the air lines run and everything mounted up on the chassis, we went ahead and put all the LevelRide in, but just temporarily. As you can see, it's a freaking mess. So we just got everything kind of wired in briefly, just so it functioned, because the main reason, or what we're trying to do, is figure out the ride height sensors on this to see where they need to be placed, where they're going to function correctly. So I can kind of go over that, and we'll show you the best way to figure out where the sensors are, but we'll end up putting a provision on the lower arm for the ride height sensors. So most of that is figured out in the math and all that to know what the ratios are, because basically the ride height sensors can only move a certain amount of distance, and since we have a long travel of this suspension, we can't put it back on the axle or anything like that. It'd be too much. It would overrun the sensor. So the sensor has a bunch of different holes in it, so you can pick how much movement it is. So we've got it figured out with the math to where it works, and it runs the whole range of motion on the sensor while it runs the whole range of motion on the axle. And so we do that front and rear. So we just needed to set this all up and get it powered and get air into it so that we can look at the controller. Actually, I have it here. We can look at the controller, which is just a phone, and see what the sensors are doing. So if you can see right here, I don't know how well it's going to show up, but this will show position of all four sensors, the airbag pressure, and then your controls. So when I do this, we can get this all set up. So we just have this temporarily wired in because all this goes into the cab, and then we don't have to pull it all out for taking the chassis to tear down for paint and all that. So anyway, this is where we're at. We can show you cycling the suspension up and down, and that's about it. We're pretty much wrapped up on what we got figured out for this back. It's all plumbed, as you saw. Everything's good to go. We can tear it all down and get it all ready for paint and body work, and then we'll have a finished truck. So hope this was helpful and help you out show you what we did with the back half and all the little accessories, and go from there. If you got any questions, hit me up, and wait for the next video, and we'll hopefully have it back from paint by then. See ya.